Imagine for a moment a world without art, without dance, opera, literature, poetry. That world would be a very, very dull place.
On this episode of the show, we have Taylor Morden, documentary filmmaker and producer. He has directed a wide range of short films, as well as the documentaries Pick It Up Ska in the 90s, Here's to Life, the short the story of refreshments, Project 88, Back to the Future Part 2, and the recent Netflix release, The Last Blockbuster. Taylor, it's my pleasure to have you on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I have to say, you are probably super excited because it's official. The news is in, the word is in, Ska is back.
Sure. Yeah, that seems legit.
Yeah, so was that the first documentary you kind of like really set your mind on? Was the Pick It Up Ska in the 90s?
No, my first feature was the story of the refreshments, which
Okay.
I started in 2016. And then as soon as I finished that, I got started on the Ska doc and the Blockbuster doc right around the same time.
Oh, really? Okay, so were multitasking projects then.
Yeah, I was making both of those at the same time, which I do not recommend to anyone who wants to make a movie. Just stick with one.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But it's I know it shows something to your dedication and ability to organize to be able to handle two projects at once. So let me ask you, which one kind of caught your attention first? Did you really want to always do a movie about ska? Were you a fan growing up?
I was a fan, but I was also a musician. I played trumpet in ska bands since I was 17 years old. So it was a personal story for me. And I just have that connection. It's been a big part of my life for a long time, over half my life. So the ska movie was very personal for me. And then, with Blockbuster, it was right place, right time. I happen to live in the town where the last Blockbuster is.
Yeah, the one thing I'll have to give you credit for is when it comes to ska music, the horn sections are always so tight. Like the timing is just has to be so spot on. I always give you guys credit because I mean, certain kinds of genres of music, right? Particularly with the horns, you can kind of let them kind of drone on and act more as filler. But ska, you have to be beat on beat, real tight, real together. So yeah, I got to say it's probably my favorite aspect of ska music.
Nice. Mine too.
So so did you now you said it was your hometown. Did you grow up going to that Blockbuster? Was there like some nostalgic connection for you?
No, no. So I didn't grow up in Bend. I lived there the last 5 years. I actually just moved back
Oh,
to Eugene, Oregon, which is not too far away. But growing up, I split my time between San Francisco and the middle of nowhere in Oregon, just a really tiny town, not that far from Blockbuster, but um, so far in the middle of nowhere that our video store was also the gas station, which was also the general store. And so that was my video store growing up, was uh, kind of like a half-mile walk, and then rent my VHS tape and walk home on this country road and pop it in the VCR. And they only had a little wall in the back for videos, and they maybe 50 movies at any given time. So I didn't have the Blockbuster experience as a kid until when I got out of high school and I moved to Eugene to go to college. There was a Blockbuster there that uh, I went to probably every week.
yeah. I mean, I don't know. Growing up, like we never really went to the Blockbuster because it was always a little bit more expensive. We always went to like kind of like the ma and pop video stores, and I don't know. You were talking about like right place, right time for you to take on this project because everyone's super nostalgic for the video store experience because growing up it was what we would do literally every Friday night. My parents would take us to the video store. We would walk around, pick something out, and I don't know, there's just something about the experience of walking around, kind of getting mesmerized by the different cover art. Kind of it was where I used to sneak off and kind of get my knowledge about horror movies because I wasn't allowed to watch the really gory ones growing up. But every time my mom would turn her back, I'd slip over to horror, as I'm sure she would use the opportunity to slip into the back room behind the beads. But, I don't know. I feel like just that experience of just going to a video store, kind of making the effort, like people have a sense of nostalgia about it that I think we're really longing for these days.
Yeah, that's definitely something I've noticed since the last blockbuster came out, and we're hearing it from all kinds of people. It's that experience that we're missing now that was such a ritual. It was such a part of our lives. And to me, it seemed like it faded out so gradually, like we never thought about missing it. It wasn't something that just went away one day. It's like after a while, you stopped going so often, and oh, now we can get DVDs in the mail. So that's more convenient. And oh, now we can stream. So maybe I'm only going to go once a month for that new release that's not available. And now I'm not going to go at all. And it took a couple of years for most people, I think, to sort of fade out from renting movies. And it's just, it didn't occur to people to miss that until just recently it became this nostalgia point of, oh right, we did used to do that.
Yeah, and it's I mean, I don't know, nowadays I feel like a lot of folks are just in like an information overload because there's so many streaming services, there's so many different options on those streaming services, and there's so much content being produced that I feel like there's that longing for a simpler time when you can just kind of like, walk through and you walk through and you actually like hunt for a tape, you find something, you have to kind of read through, and it's I don't know, there's a ritual to it as well that kind of created a sense of community, you know,
Yeah.
because I remember, just even when in my teenage years when I go to the movie store, I mean, I would definitely recommend that it'd be like a great date opportunity. You could actually see what certain people's taste in movies are, and if you're a movie buff, that's very important. But yeah, you'd talk to strangers. You kind of like share movie recommendations, that sort of thing, and it I don't know, it just made it seem like more of a homely feeling.
Yeah, and the browsing was enjoyable. Now we sit on a couch and I get so frustrated clicking through the streaming services, and I have so many options, but they're not all in one place. I got to go from one app to the other app and look and see what they have. And oh, nope, you know what? Netflix did have the better thing. Let me go back there and watch that. Whereas before, in the video store, they were all in one place and they were sorted by genre, or some of the places had like by director or by actor or all these cool ways. And if you didn't find anything, there was a person there to talk to and say, you know what, none of these new releases look good. I like the Goonies. What else you got?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I remember one of the video stores that I went to growing up just had a wall that was just like, Dick's picks, Bill's picks. And, they would change week by week. So, you actually kind of got to know the people that were working there. And, it kind of helps, build that mom and pop brand a little bit as well.
Mhm.
But I don't know, man. I feel that and this is what always happens to me, right? I'll spend like 30 to 40 minutes looking for something, and then when I put it on, I'll pass out like 20 minutes in, and I won't even
Yeah.
finish the movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's the other thing. It's like it used to be such a chore to go and get a movie, and you spent all this time and money that I finished the movie every time. I'm committed, right? I've gone and I've walked to this place and I've taken home this VHS tape and I rewound it and I popped my popcorn and I'm going to watch a movie. And now it's like, yeah, I guess I'll watch that, but I'm going to look at my phone and I'm going to do this. And if I, get up to go to the bathroom and get distracted by something else, just forget about the movie. That happens. Whereas I feel like that didn't happen when you had to work for it. Now movies are like, they're just free. They're just everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, there was definitely I don't know, it kind of goes back to that old Jurassic Park saying, T-Rex doesn't want to be fed, he wants to hunt. There was something in the hunt of going and finding a movie. And, me in particular, I was always a fan of going out and finding like some like ridiculous B movie that you'd have to hunt for that not every video store would have, right? So you kind of had to, look around at the different varieties, see what you could find. And because, I mean, particularly like the VHS age, of rentals in the early days, like there wasn't a lot of copies of certain movies, and you really had to go out of your way to try and find it because I mean, not every video store is going to have werewolves on wheels.
Right. Right. Yeah, and we definitely, when I was living here in Eugene, there was Blockbuster, but there was also like the cool video store, like you go to Blockbuster if you wanted to see whatever the new release was because they'd have 100 copies. But if you wanted that weird movie or that obscure movie or, the craziest thing that you've never heard of that, oh man, you got to check this out. That was always at the local mom and pop store that had the guy behind the counter that was kind of mean, but he was kind of cool. And you know, that was a whole thing. So I used to go to both. I'd go to Blockbuster first and get The Matrix or, whatever was out that was like, oh, I got to see that new movie. Um, but then on the way home, go by the cool indie video store and be like, well, what's the new trauma movie? What's the weird thing that just came out?
Yeah, and I don't know. I feel like that the video store experience has, become like such a cult thing now because, now you have a complete subculture of individuals that are recreating video stores in their basements with their old VHS collections. And I mean, it's a subgenre that I understand to an extent, kind of like people who collect like obscure records, with collecting VHSs, except the main difference is, the record's a better quality. VHS is not.
Right. Yeah, I have such a hard time with that. I got into collecting VHS sort of over the course of making The Last Blockbuster, and it's fun. I am such a huge fan of holding a movie in my
Yeah.
hands, and a DVD is less, right? I think that's what's great about records is they're so big. Like I got this album and it's big, and laser discs are the same size, but with VHS, it's like it's a big, heavy object, and I love having a shelf full and looking at all of them. But the quality is so bad that often I'll just pick one out from the shelf and then try to find it on a streaming service. Like, can I watch this in HD or no? Because
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense. Like records, you're right; it's better quality, and it's got a vibe to it and a warmth to it that CDs never had, and that streaming certainly doesn't have. But VHS was outdated when DVDs came out, and now it's back in fashion, but it's almost like it's cool how bad it looks. You know, there are some movies where because the special effects were never meant to be in HD, where they do look better on VHS because the werewolf looks real if it's kind of blurry. Whereas if you watch it on Blu-ray, it's like, oh, they never meant for this to exist in HD.
Right. Yeah. I mean, a prime example of that is Sleepaway Camp. There's a scene where, like the killer's standing in the doorway. And, spoiler alert, if you hadn't seen it, it's Angela, the little girl. Well, I mean, not really a little girl, spoiler alert as well there. But in the HD version, you can clearly see that it's not the girl, it's the boy, because they just had him as a stand-in because, he was a bigger body type, right? And you can clearly see that it's not her. But yeah, just to your point, like they never expected that there would be a quality that we have today in high definition, and I mean especially 4K.
Yeah. It's also fun when you see old TV shows that were shot, in 4:3, and then uh, when they upres them and they put them on streaming now, there's like stuff happening on the sides that was cut off when it was on TV, and sometimes there'll be like a crew member or like a weird thing because they shot it on film, so it is widescreen, but there's this extra space that was never intended for people to see, so that's fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's interesting to think how, technology evolves. And I think, like, the one of the core tenets of the documentary itself is how changing technology, changes the markets and changes how distribution happens, and kind of the rise and fall of these industries that no one thought would go away.
Yeah, I mean that's really the thing. It's hard to try to predict what the thing is that exists now that's going to be totally obsolete. But it happens, and it happens every day. I mean, look at what Uber did to the taxi driving world, and what Airbnb has done with hotels, and all these things where there's always going to be the old thing, but the new thing comes in, and it's just like, oh, this is the new normal. you know that happens uh all the time. It doesn't always kill the thing before. With movie renting, with streaming, it did. you know it took away almost all reason to go to a video store.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, if you have something at your fingertips, 24/7, then you're not going to make that extra effort because, I mean, let's be honest, most folks are lazy primarily after a hard day of work.
Right, right. Like GPS comes out, and people don't carry maps anymore. We used to always have maps in our glove box, and we'd use that, or later we'd print out directions or ask for directions. And now you talk to people and you ask, what's the address? Just give me the address, I'll type it in. Just, I don't want to, don't tell me to turn left at the big pink dinosaur, because I trust Google now.
Right. Yeah, I actually, over the holiday weekend, went to a music festival, and it was down in buttfuck Illinois. Like, it was way down there. It was back in the hills. And there was a good hour and a half that I had lost my signal. And I didn't have, an address to, like, try and, like, Google Maps to. I didn't have any maps with me. I just had to kind of use my wits, look for signs. And, it took me a few hours, but I was able to find my way there and find my way back. And it makes you, I don't know, it makes you appreciate how much you depend on that technology to get you from A to B, because I wouldn't have even thought that it would have taken me, or that my service wouldn't have covered, I mean, it was an hour and a half I was driving, like 65. So we're talking like what, a 70 to 80 mile radius, out in the hills. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, but it's good for us to be reminded of what life is like without the constant, the whole world at our fingertips all the time. It's not healthy.
No, not at all. But I don't know. There's something about, like, the advancement of technology. Like, I mean, just going back to kind of like that appreciation. Like, I was over at my grandfather's not too long ago, and he always tells me, he's like in his upper 80s, right? But he always tells me what it was like when he was a kid, how they didn't have cars, didn't have water, didn't have electricity. They rode a mule to the general store, sort of a thing.
Yeah.
And just over the course of his lifetime, the advancement that they've seen, not just in infrastructure, but technology. Like he was saying, how when his ma gave birth to him, they couldn't go to a doctor because there wasn't a doctor within a 50-mile radius. There wasn't a town in a 50-mile radius, and now you can talk to a doctor from the palm of your hand. And I mean, it makes you curious about what comes next, because we as a human species have never had access to this type of technology before. How it's going to change us, how it's going to, help us evolve or devolve depending on how we use it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like we're not headed in a good direction with it. It's given everybody access to all the world's information, but it's also given everybody a voice. And it used to be if you wanted to hear from some stranger about something, you had to like go to the local bar and start a rousing conversation. And then if you didn't like what they had to say, you got in a bar fight. And now it's the whole internet has a million opinions all the time. And yeah, it's making everybody mad at everybody else all the time. And that just seems to be getting worse and worse. And it's because of the technology. And you look at where we were 20 years ago to now, it's astronomically different. So where are we going to be in another 10, 20, 50 years? I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's interesting to think just how something as simple as an algorithm, programmed to feed you the things that you like, has been used to just like completely reroute brain chemistry and almost like completely rewire certain people. And yeah, it's like you're saying, it's great. It gives you access to all the information you could possibly have, but it also gives you access to all the disinformation that you could possibly have. And I mean, you know, I hate to say it, but the vast majority of folks out there, primarily the older folks, because they never had the opportunity to learn like actual critical thinking skills, because, my dad never took research methodology as a senior in high school, you know what I mean? But luckily, like our generation, we've had the ability to kind of look at that so we can look at sources and we can differentiate, what's bullshit or not. And I don't know. I feel like we need to kind of push that critical thinking aspect and help folks think for themselves.
Yeah, we have the ability to check resources and check where everything's coming from. We tend not to, right? Because it's not convenient. It's not the easy thing. The easy thing is I'm just going to look through the internet, and the first thing that agrees with what I already thought, that's that's my source, and I believe it, and it's true, and everybody else is wrong and stupid. And now I'm going to get up on my soapbox, and we're going to have a big fight about it. But it's interesting. I think about like the Terminator movies, right? And Jurassic Park, where we were so preoccupied seeing what we could do to stop and wonder if we should do it. And we just seem like we're barreling ahead as a species, and no one is stopping to think if any of this is a good idea. We're just, yeah, let's bring on the robot apocalypse. I guess that's what's happening.
Yeah, I don't know, different theorists that I've looked into in regards to like, developing technology, they say there's really two options that there is for humanity. We either kind of merge with the technology and become one with it, or we tend to, develop like AI systems that will do it for us. And man, both of those options don't seem like a good idea in my mind because I don't know, I think I'd be one of those guys going out all humane unless there is, some sort of a RoboCop alternative.
Right. Yeah, it's like we haven't learned from the Matrix and the RoboCops and the Terminators, and we're just we're just gonna see. Oh, that won't affect us. We'll be fine. We're smarter than those fake people in the movies, but we're not.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I don't know. Like, I feel like, I mean, it comes down to that age old question of, society reflecting art or art reflecting society. Because you look at a movie like RoboCop, which was a rental that I had multiple times. I love RoboCop. It was, the perfect satirical representation of all the negative aspects of like 80s consumerism and American culture at that time. The hyper nationalism, the deregulation, the hyper corporatism. I mean, even to the point that it was a mainstream belief that greed was good. But, if you look at Robocop now, and you look at it with kind of like the eye set, or the eyes that it's a representation of the society that we live in. Like, it's almost eerily similar how you have something so close as far as like the police brutality, the income inequality. I mean, there's a lot of sci-fi out there that has predicted it's predicted the the sociocultural outcomes, but to a lesser exaggerated extent.
Right. Yeah. I think it's because a lot of the great sci-fi was made in the 80s when a lot of these same issues were first coming to light. That was the greed era and the capitalism becoming at the forefront. And like you said, people thinking it's good, greed is good. Um, but yeah, the 80s were a time that many of us thought we had gotten past, but we seem to be reverting in a lot of ways um, backwards, and that's trouble. But it's art reflects life too, so maybe we'll get some good science fiction movies out of it.
Yeah, and speaking of good science fiction movies and going back, one of the documentaries you had was, I mean, it was about a shot by shot remake of Back to the Future Part Two, and I I'll always say it kind of sucks because we could have had that that future in 2015 where the Cubs win the World Series, but they couldn't pull it off, so we ended up with Biff.
Yeah,
uh,
that's true.
So I don't know. I guess how did that project come along? Because it seems like such a large collaboration with different directors, producers.
Yeah, so what that was early 2020 when the pandemic first hit us, and I knew a bunch of creative folks like myself that were stuck at home. We were all, under different stages of quarantine and lockdown, and we wanted to do something collaborative to bring us together again, but we were all stuck at home. So I was talking to some other filmmakers, and we kind of came up with the idea of like, let's make a feature film, but we'll each do like a minute of it and we'll stitch it all together. And if that sort of evolved into, well, how are we going to know who the characters are? Oh, let's just remake a popular movie, and they have to be iconic characters so that you can tell, who's who all the way throughout. Um, and so we landed on Back to the Future, and it had to be Back to the Future 2 because hoverboards,
Yeah.
because Future 1 doesn't have hoverboards, so I'm not having it. Great movie, but we did that, and that started small. It started with just people I knew, reaching out to other filmmakers and saying, who wants to do a minute of this Back to the Future remake? We split it into 88 parts, but I don't have enough friends. It got leaked out into like a Back to the Future fan group, and we ended up with 300 and something people in like 13 different countries around the world making this thing that, it's varying levels of like totally professional animation to like some kids shot it on their iPad and they've never done any filmmaking before, and it's everything in between. But that's kind of what makes it good and charming. And it was something positive, and that was very early. We were all pretty scared. We were still wiping down our groceries and afraid to touch anything or go anywhere or see anybody. So it was really a nice project to sort of distract people. A lot of families worked on it together. It gave them something to do when they're locked at home. It's like, well, let's make a hoverboard out of cardboard and we'll spray paint it, and then the cat can be Doc, and we'll get the dog to be Biff, and it'll be something. And it was something, and it's a fun thing that we did.
Man, that's almost like some avant-garde project. I love it because I mean, going back to that sense of community, right? Like nothing builds a sense of fandom better than giving people a creative outlet within that fandom. Like that's why I think cosplay is such a big thing. Like people love to bring their originality to a character. People love to
Mhm.
change it up and kind of make it their own because a lot of times these characters they become a part of us, and we want to seek to express that because these characters mean something, and no two characters mean more to me in movie history than Doc and Marty. I watched that movie religiously as a child, so much so I wore out our VHS. My mom had to buy another one.
Nice, nice.
Though,
Yes, those are huge movies for me, and I do a Marty McFly cosplay at comic book conventions now and then. So it's it's big. It's a big deal.
awesome. Do you do part two or do you do the original Marty?
Yeah, 2015 because hoverboard.
Yeah, yeah, you gotta have a prop. I still have a Marty McFly, the sparkly. Well, I wouldn't say sparkly, the reflective rainbow hat. That's just like it's just one of my normal hats that I'll wear out. I
Nice.
uh, I don't need a reason to cosplay that. But I don't know. Do you actually have the shoes to go with it though? The ones that light up because man,
Mm.
those when Nike re-released those, they were sharp, son.
Yeah, I don't have the real Nikes. Those were way out of my budget range. There's some cheap knockoffs that you could get on eBay, and then you have to customize them. You have to put the Nike logo on yourself because they couldn't legally sell them. But they do light up. They don't self lace because, again, those were, I think they've only made a couple of pairs of those that actually self lace, but I couldn't afford any of that. So I just have the cheap knockoffs, but customized and looking good, looking legit.
Yeah, as long as they're comfortable, that's what matters. Because man, one thing I will give Nike props for is they make a comfortable shoe.
They do.
So I guess I don't know. So have you or did you get into cosplay? When you were younger, have you always been a Comic Con guy?
I never lived where there was a Comic Con, so I didn't go until God, 2008, maybe
Okay.
2007. And I went to San Diego because I had a friend who was working at Dark Horse Comics, and he's like, "Come by, you can, I'll get you in with our booth pass." And so I was like, "Well, this sounds cool." And I was so blown away by the spectacle of everything. I mean, if you've never been to San Diego Comic Con, it's a thing to behold. And I was pretty much hooked from then. And I had never, I took Halloween pretty seriously, but I never dressed up outside of that. And just seeing everybody's costumes was so inspiring of like, oh my God, these people are so creative and they did so much work just to wear this thing, maybe one day a year at this convention. Um, it was just inspiring. So that was after that was when I sort of started to think about doing it. And I went to a bunch of cons, and I would start by just wearing the hat, right? Or just the jacket or carry around the hoverboard. And it kind of just got more and more fun. And I did end up doing a pretty awesome Ninja Turtle costume with like a sculpted head and the shell and the whole thing, and entered into some costume contests and won some prizes. And that was pretty fun. Um, I just got a 3D printer, so I'm going to get back into it. I just printed a Rocketeer helmet this week.
Yeah, that's an underrated flick. I love The Rocketeer. I mean, I mean, I get why people like don't like it. It's definitely cheesy, but like, man, it's still such an adventurous, fun movie. But I don't know. I'm glad now. See, Did you like build the turtle suit yourself, or did you like go over it with latex and foam, or did you like paper mache it and do it more arts and craft style?
It's pretty legit. It's EVA foam that heat formed and sculpted. The head is softer foam that I sculpted into shape and then covered in Bondo and sanded. And then it's wrapped in fabric so that it's not, it's comic book style Ninja Turtles. It's a little bit more the dark, edgy. It's got like the battle damage on the shell and all that. And it's
Yeah,
pretty.
did you go like straight Eastman Lair with it, like the original
Mhm.
turtle designs? Because man, that original run of 50, maybe 51 issues. I mean, if you're gonna get into Turtles comics, that's the quintessential Turtles to get into because it's dark, it's edgy, there's a lot of action, and man, the writing is good. Even when they're getting out there and going to like different dimensions and fighting dinosaurs and shit.
Yeah, 100%. It was based on the comics only. I had seen someone again at a con in DC that had made a turtle suit like that, and I kind of just like followed him around all day. I was like, "Well, what'd you make this out of? How'd you make that? What'd you do that?" And got his email address and was like corresponding and kind of. I didn't make mine look like his, but it was the same kind of materials and stuff.
Yeah, now did you get into prop making for like any of the short films you did, or was this or was cosplaying like your first time actually getting into making props and costumes?
Um, I've definitely made props for films, but it's more like picking out stuff, at thrift stores, like finding the right clock radio or the right, you know, piece of wardrobe or something. 'Cause I don't really sew, which is very hard for costumes, but I can weather things or I can customize things well enough. Make a fake gun look like a real gun, stuff like that. But I've never built a prop from scratch for a film. I'm excited about trying that in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it seems like you really got your start, grinding your teeth on doing a lot of shorts, and then it seems like you ended up like doing these documentaries more as like different COVID projects because it seems like you were balancing them all at the same time. But let me ask you, do you see yourself like going back into short films? Like, is there pros and cons to doing shorts as opposed to focusing on documentaries?
Um, I'm definitely going to make more short films in the future because they're fun, they're quick, quick turnaround. But um, I'll probably keep doing documentary. I'd like to make a feature scripted film at some point. So I'm working on scripts and I'm working on ideas for that. So I'm kind of open to anything at this point. But the shorts are really just more for fun, spend a weekend with your friends and make something.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's the I don't know, that's a thing that I feel like when you're in any industry, any creative industry long enough, you stop having that fun. It becomes, just another job. And if you remain focused on having a good time, then your ideas are going to remain fresh and it's something that you're still going to have passion for, 20 years in.
Definitely. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like if I'm working on a documentary for 4 years straight, it's nice to throw in, like a horror short in there to be like, well, that's different. That's a different thing. I'm not just focused on blockbuster video and ska music for 3 years straight.
Well, let me ask you, how long did it take you to shoot the blockbuster documentary? Like, was it over the course of a couple of months, couple of years?
That one was 4 years, during which 2 of those years I was also making the ska documentary. So yeah, from 2017 when we started to 2021 when it really came out, it was a 4-year project. Documentaries can be like that, especially when you're working on stuff that's happening in real life. You have to wait and see what happens. I have no control over what happens at Blockbuster.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems that, I mean, I don't know. I guess let me ask before I assume when when you first started thinking about like doing the blockbuster project, was there like a certain like aspect of the video store that you really wanted to capture, or were you just like more like trying to tell like a personal story about the people that work there? Because it goes in both ways, and you balance those two aspects of it real well. The blockbuster corporation and just like the effect on these small town owners.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. When I started it, um, I was really just focused on that store because I was so fascinated of like what is going on here, who's still renting DVDs in at that time in 2017. Uh, but early on, I brought on my partner on the project, Zeke, who's a writer and producer, and he was very much story focused. So he was like, you know, characters, the people. Let's really, you know, tell this story of this store because I originally was thinking, there were 12 stores left. I was like, well, let's go to all of them and we'll see these dying stores in the towns that they're in. We didn't get to do that because they were closing too fast. By the time we would, get ready to go to Alaska to go to the store, it was closed. So that didn't really work out. But the main thing that we both wanted really to capture with it was, that idea that you talked about earlier of like, what are we losing when these things disappear? What, yes, we're moving forward and technology is great and the world is changing rapidly, but let's take a moment to remember, what was good about going to a place and interacting with people and experiencing movies, not just, on demand, click a button, but like they mattered more because we had to work to see them because it was this event, this activity that we would do. And so that sort of hit us early on because we were there, we were renting movies, we were going to Blockbuster, and it felt different because we hadn't done it in a little while and it felt better. And people forget that. People forget that it is better to go interact with a human being than it is to sit on your couch. I mean, maybe for some people, they love not having to see people and not having to go to a place. But walking around those aisles and seeing all those movies and seeing somebody else pick up a movie and hearing their conversation of like, oh man, that third Highlander movie isn't as good as the fourth Highlander movie, so don't rent that one. And then you walk over and you pick up the fourth one and go, huh, maybe I didn't give this one a shot. That doesn't happen when you're at home streaming something. So it was important for us to try to capture that idea of what we're losing as a society when these places go away.
Yeah, I think what we're really losing is that sense of community around an art form.
Yep.
Because I mean, I am a member of about 30 to 40 different movie groups on Facebook. I join another one every week because it just recommends it. Just so we can bitch about like stuff that was or stuff in movies from like 40 years ago. We can talk about a wide variety. You can talk about movie recommendations, what's a movie that's meaningful to you, and that kind of community. I mean, I guess it still exists, but it's like you were saying, still a click away. It's not that in-person experience that you get because I mean, I've made friends at video stores primarily, right after high school into college. I mean, we'd go and we'd rent a bunch of DVDs and you'd always run into somebody. And, primarily, video store in a college town, that's a great way to meet like-minded people.
Mhm.
And, I don't know. There's always, I guess it just like kind of beckons back to a change in how movies became content because case in point, like I'll use movie posters as a prime example. Man, if you look at movie posters, in the 80s, in the 90s, even in the 70s, when they were those full matte, like hand painted oil paintings, like the works of like Drew Strassman and stuff,
Mhm.
Goonies, Indiana Jones. I mean, those covers just draw you in. I mean, primarily like and this will be a deep cut. There's a movie called The Nest, and this movie, I don't know why when I was a kid, but the cover art just captivated me, primarily because it's a woman having sex with a giant cockroach. But it's an oil painting, and it's just so vivid and so well done that even something so grotesque can just capture your attention like that. And nowadays you look at movie posters, and they're all cookie cutter, Photoshop. Part of it's red, part of it's blue. It kind of, it kind of has the exact same format every time because marketing shows that that format works. There's no sense of individual attraction to a movie anymore. And I guess you could say with like the big summer blockbusters as well, with all the green screen CGI, it seems like it's the same thing over and over again. And I don't know. I feel like that makes people feel disconnected from the art form in a lot of ways.
Yeah, 100%. A great thing about those posters, in the 80s and 90s, when the video store was king, that was how you judged a movie. You're walking by, and if the box art was amazing, you would rent that movie. And now, the thumbnail just has to get you interested enough, and then the trailer's right there almost every time. Or if it isn't, you see it, and then you on your phone, you're like, oh, show me that trailer or who's in it or whatever. But in the 80s, they had one shot, and it was a painting of a cockroach having sex with a woman or whatever, or that Goonies painting,
Yeah.
um, or the Indiana Jones paintings, or Star Wars, any of these ones that were amazing, and that was their job. It was the only thing you knew about that movie until you saw it, or until your friends told you about it. It was like, what does that poster look like? And then there was the dying art that I loved, in the 90s, especially early 2000s, when video stores were really at their peak and DVDs were out, is people would make those knockoff movies. Right next to Transformers, they would have Transmorphers, and the cover was just close enough where they could trick the grandparents into renting it for the kids when the real one was out. And that was a whole genre of movie that was just like close enough.
Yeah.
Like, we're just going to make a movie to fill these video store shelves, and people will rent them because people aren't that smart. And those were some awesome movies.
Yeah, man, those seem like some Roger Corman specials. But I mean, I guess most of them were probably like Bollywood movies because I don't know. I mean, I guess going Back to the Future remake as well, dude. Have you ever seen the Indian remake of RoboCop?
I've seen clips of it. Yeah.
I mean, dude, that movie. I mean, it's definitely like shot as a satire on the first one, so the whole thing's done tongue in cheek, but like just like the way they overplay every action scene, I mean it is just phenomenal. I would put it up there with the original RoboCop. And I'm sure you've seen the clip of all the dudes getting their dick shot off.
Yeah. It's awesome.
But yeah, I mean, just kind of like those rip off movies, like they've always been around. I mean, even if it's like Jaws and Piranha, right?
Right.
There's always been like those like kind of like knockoff movies, but primarily in the age of the DVD, when you could go straight to DVD and your film only had to cost maybe 100 to 200,000 dollars. I mean, that's a lucrative business right there. So yeah, you saw an explosion of that in the early 2000s.
Yeah. And DVDs were cheap to make. Like, compared to VHS, the manufacturing was so cheap, and you could just flood the market. And I mean, DVDs were so popular because of, special features, or just because they didn't take up as much room in your house. People would buy more, and they would be everywhere. They would be at the grocery store checkout. It's just like DVDs were the beginning of when movies became content, right? It was this thing, this sort of commodity of the DVD. But the DVD, I think, versus streaming, it really um, elevated the movie because of things like special features and, you know, widescreen and director's commentary and all these things and surround sound. And they they were kind of an amazing breakthrough if you loved movies. If you're just a regular person, it was also like, oh man, I can get, you know, both Gremlins movies for $4 on DVD, and then I I own that now, and I still own that. But it it kind of was something for everybody, which was a really cool thing. And now it's still something for everybody, but less so for the people who actually care about the movies.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm guilty of that. I'm one of those people who will buy a DVD just for the bonus content because I've seen the movie a dozen times or more, and I want to watch it with the director commentary. You know, with the yeah, I mean, I love those behind the scenes documentaries as well that kind of go into the production about it because yeah, I'm gonna nerd out over movies, and even though DVDs, I mean, let's be honest, they're almost irrelevant at this point. I will still buy a Criterion Collection DVD every time they put out one because I will continue to buy Criterion Collection DVDs because going back, they do a lot of those rare movies that they're really good, but they don't have people don't have the access to them like they would most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the same way. When we were making this movie, I just moved away from Bend a month ago, but I was there for 5 years, and for 4 of those years, I was going to Blockbuster pretty regularly, and I would rent movies just for the special features. You know, movies I had just seen in the theater or just watched on Netflix or wherever, because that's like where I learned about movies. My film school or whatever was just DVD special features and VHS special features before that. And HBO used to have these like making the movie 15-minute things that they would show before movies when I was a kid. Um, but yeah, even up until now, I would rent movies at Blockbuster just for the special features or just to watch with the director's commentary because it's it's a wonderful thing that is disappearing. You know, I guess on iTunes you can get some bonus content with some movies, but it's not the norm. Like when DVD was king, that was the norm. The norm was you could watch the movie, then you could watch the making of, then you could watch the bloopers, then you could watch, you know, the trailers for all the other movies, and then you could watch the movie again with the audio commentary. And it's kind of a great time to be a fan of movies.
Yeah, yeah, it really was because I mean, I guess I still get my fix on that, listening to like movie podcasts where they'll interview like, different editors, different directors. Why did you make certain shots this way, so on and so forth? Because I mean, there's always going to be an interest in that as a medium.
Right.
But
That's the
I
thing
don't know.
now. I watch a movie and it just goes straight to YouTube, right? I'll watch a movie and then right after I'm like, where's the interviews? Where's the making of, the behind the scenes? Where's somebody's cell phone footage from the set? I got to see how they do that shot, you know? It
Yeah,
still
yeah,
exists, but you got to work for it now. It used to be all on the disc.
yeah, well, I mean, I guess for movie fans, it's similar to like having to work and actually go to a video store and rent a movie. Now you got to work to try and get the special features that you no longer have
Yeah.
access to. But
Yeah.
I also got to say, like, you have some phenomenal guests and interviews that you were able to get on your film. I mean, you're talking to Lloyd Kaufman, Kevin Smith. How did you, kind of get as much momentum behind this project, be able to reach out and start getting some of these experts in the field?
Yeah, well, we started with sort of friends of friends. Like my producer had worked in Hollywood for a long time, and he kind of knew somebody who knew somebody who knew Jamie Kennedy, and that's kind of how that one worked out. But for the most part, we just asked. You know, we reached out cold. emails to managers or Instagram messages to people directly. And I think what really helped us is the Blockbuster name. You know, it sounded pretty official. Oh, we're making a Blockbuster video documentary. Do you want to be a part of that? It's going to be, you know, cool. Or we would tell people, did you know there's still one Blockbuster video left and we're making a movie about it? And they were all like, what? Okay. Yeah, I guess we'll talk about that. And folks like Kevin Smith, you know, he loves talking about movies. He worked at a video store. It it was a no-brainer, and he said yes right away, but he's so busy that it took over a year to schedule an hour of his time.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, even though he doesn't, do as much directing as well, probably as much directing as he likes. I mean, dude has a podcast a podcast empire that he's been, managing. I mean, pretty hands on for over a decade at this point. I mean, he's also one of the OG podcasters as well. Yeah, I mean, the entire medium owes a lot to Kevin Smith, but I mean, being someone who, worked in a video store, it's got to have that nostalgic connection for him as well. And I guess, I mean, anybody, that you interviewed, I'm sure, well, everybody maybe except for Lloyd Kaufman, I'm sure they have a soft spot for Blockbuster.
Yeah, and it's the way we approach the subject, it wasn't really just about Blockbuster, it was about the video store and about the feeling of going and renting a movie. And whether you like Blockbuster or not, that resonated with everybody. You know, if you when we hand people the VHS tape and we're like, here, remember this? Everybody had that same reaction of like, oh right, this is what movies used to be. And that, you know, people who work in movies or love movies, it's nice to be reminded of like that feeling, you know, when you're 13 years old and you first saw ET or whatever the movie was that really hooked you into it. And you can see that when we talk to people, like they light up when you talk about certain aspects of video renting, because it was such a huge part of so many of our lives that, like I said, we've forgotten to miss it.
Yeah, and I think yeah, I think that reminder, like, it, kind of makes you, kind of makes you have a bit of a retrospection as well, because it just kind of reminds you how fast the time does fly. And I mean, I feel like, not just with video stores, but you look at like malls, how they're disappearing. I mean, and ooh, I hate to think about it, but I do know at some point in time someone's gonna get a warm and soft fuzzy feeling about going into a Walmart because one time soon just going to a retail store, like those big box stores, just won't be a thing. I mean, another 30 years from now, because with technology changes how commerce is done, and how that is done reimagines markets and reimagines in ways that sometimes we can't even think about, because I would have, growing up, I would have never thought you could get food just delivered to your house. It's a game changer.
Right. And a lot of that stuff in the last year has changed rapidly. You know, restaurants, it used to be like some of them would have takeout and some would have delivery, but in the last year, that's become the norm because they had to survive. But that's not going to go away. No one's going to take away their takeout menu as soon as everything is open again. So it's kind of just like rapidly kick things into gear of, you know, and like what we're doing right now, this is the norm now. You know, you can set up a video meeting with anybody anywhere, and everybody's pretty comfortable with it because we've had a year where we had to get used to it, and that's not going to go away. um, so we're at a moment right now where things are changing even more rapidly than they already were, which was already very rapidly.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the long term, effects of what just COVID did to the market, right? The fact that you're going to have a large amount of companies that are going to be focusing on remote workers, how that's going to bring jobs to, more rural areas, more impoverished areas, but how that's also, long term going to affect property prices in cities. Like when all these big skyscrapers, no longer need office space. What do you do with all of that? So I mean, I think the implications of COVID on the market, like it's going to lead to rapid expansion and change that's going to go on for decades.
Yeah. Yeah, decentralizing cities is like the obvious thing of when people don't have to live in cities, will they still live in cities? Um, and some people live in big cities because there's art and there's culture and there's community, and those people will probably stay. But if you lived in San Francisco because your high paying job was in San Francisco, and now you can do that same job from the middle of, South Dakota and have 50 acres and a mansion for what you were paying for a one bedroom apartment, why would you go back? And we're going to see a lot of that for sure. And you talk about the shopping malls, right? We have all over the country, we have empty shopping malls that are still sitting there that are dying or totally gone. And they just, no one has taken the land yet and turned it into anything else. And that's definitely going to happen with office space where jobs that can be done remotely, why pay the overhead for a building if everybody can work from home? And for some jobs, you need to be in a place with other people, and that's never going to change. But as it just seems so obvious that everything's going to dramatically shift, and then, like you said, one day we're going to miss Walmart, and it's going to be crazy.
Yeah, because man, for as much as I avoid Walmart now, I know there's going to be a day where I'm going to be like, man, I miss just being able to, walk up and down aisles and just look at what's on sale,
Yeah.
And I don't know, like primarily with the malls as well. I feel like that was, I don't know, I feel like that was like a driving force. Well, I mean, I guess 2010s just in general, every 30 years, nostalgia cycle comes back and people are longing for when they were kids. So like the 80s kind of like went through its thing, and I guess people were longing for the malls. That's why you had all these different YouTube channels popping up where they're just, exploring old abandoned malls, or they're or all the photographers focusing on like, liminal space photos, that sort of thing. But I don't know, like there was the mall I worked at when I was in high school that was local to us. I worked at the Sears there, and they kept that mall limping along with like three stores in it as long as they possibly could. And then, finally Carson's left, and it was the last. It was the last store there, and that mall just sat. They tried about four or five different options on what to do with it. They wanted to turn it into a water park. They wanted to turn it into a music venue. They wanted to do all of these different things, but none of them panned through. And eventually they just tore it down. And I don't know, that's the thing about the past, though. It's inevitably going to get torn down, and you don't appreciate it in the present when it's there in front of you.
Right. Yeah, I just moved back here to Eugene, Oregon, and one of the first things I did was I drove to the old mall I used to go to, which was in a neighboring town that was, for me, I lived in the middle of nowhere, and we'd drive an hour to get to this mall. It was a big deal. Had a movie theater, an arcade, and all the cool stuff. And it's still there, but it's not a mall anymore. It's a Kohl's and a Hobby Lobby and a Target and a Walmart, and they just took all the space. They took over the common space, the hallway part of the mall, and it's just, you can't go from building to building. It's a strip mall
Right.
basically. uh and it made me so sad. I was like overwhelmed with how sad I was that this mall was gone. uh because I guess I'm particularly attuned to missing physical spaces after working on the Blockbuster doc for so long. I'm like, we got to hold on to these physical spaces because when they're gone, and it's just inevitable. There's nothing we can really do to stop that kind of progress. As big and scary of a corporation as Amazon is, who doesn't want to be able to order their AA batteries and have them show up at their house the next day and not go to the store? Everybody wants that. They've solved a problem we didn't know we had.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, I mean, trying to draw a comparison between, the mall and the video store. I mean, it goes back to that sense of community, right? Because, man, I remember going to the mall, and even if, we weren't even there to buy anything, we were just being mall rats, you'd end up running into someone in the food court. Or you'd, especially when I was a kid, pick some quarters out of the fountain and go upstairs to the arcade, right? And I mean,
Yep.
arcades as well, those were the first to go. And, occasionally you find like little novelty arcades that'll, still have something. But overall, those kind of things are going wayside. And I don't know, it kind of gives you that sense of longing.
Yeah, it's just everything's become digital and virtual, and real places are going away. And the generations that are coming up that have never had an arcade and never been to a mall or a video store, it's normal for them. And we're the generation that's going to be the old people who are, back in my day, we used to, a movie used to be a thing that you could touch, and it was before, and you'd call the internet with your computer. It would call the internet. um, but it makes me feel old. It makes me feel like I shouldn't care. Like, the younger generation doesn't care that there aren't malls because they never knew malls. They never went and just hung out all day. Got there at noon for a 4 o'clock movie so you could just walk around and see what was going on. That's not a thing. They have Snapchat and TikTok and things we didn't have, and that's normal. So, I miss it and I care, but I also feel like that's just me being old. I'm just getting old, and this is what it feels like. Everything feels different and wrong, and I want things to be the way they were when I was a teenager.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like primarily with kids these days, my friend, her son's like 12, and he always comes to the house and, when they're over here, and he's always just sitting on his tablet. And I was just like, man, like, shouldn't you be like outside, like, hanging out with your friends, doing this, doing that? And he's like, oh, no, we don't play outside anymore. We do this. And they just Snapchat each other. And it's just like, even like, the most basic types of interactions that I would have had as a kid, because they just, I don't know, the way you interact has changed because when I was a kid, I would get kicked out of the house. My mom would kick me out and she'd say, come back at dark.
Yep.
Be home for dinner. And you ain't coming in after that. Now, I'm sure she just wanted to get me out of the house so she can clean, have some me time, whatever the case may be. But like, I guess that makes me feel appreciative of the time I lived in because, you know, yeah, I mean, you're probably roughly around my age as well. We were the last generation that remembers what it was like before the internet and that kind of like what a game changer the internet was because like there's like an aspect of identity too because I'm sure when you go on the internet, you look at it as I'm going on the internet. I'm going on this like artificial thing, right? When I go on Facebook, I'm just going on a website. But kids today, like they view the internet as reality, right? It's their sense of social media and what's occurring on the internet is merged with their sense of identity, that sense of who they are. And that's radically different than how we would have ever defined ourselves because I mean, I don't know, I really don't view the internet as a real thing. And I feel like 2016, the last few years, like that was kind of a wake up call for a lot of people that what happens on the internet does have real life implications.
Yeah. Yeah, it is really interesting, that sort of perspective that you bring up, where we approach the internet as like a thing, because we used to have to dial into it and wait, and you get, and it was by hour. You'd pay for your AOL and you would get 20 hours a month or whatever, so you could only use the internet a finite amount, and it was so slow that 20 hours was like four pictures or whatever you were going to download, um, maybe a chat room or something. But yeah, it's kind of like, to me, like when you used to hear the older generation talk about growing up without electricity, and it just I couldn't fathom it. I couldn't imagine what that would be like, because when the power goes out, you get out the candles and the flashlights. But even when we were kids, the power going out was a big deal. It was like, oh man, the TV's gone. I love the TV. VCR doesn't work. The power's out. Um, and now it's like when the internet goes down, it's, oh my God, what are we going to do? We don't have this thing. It's become like the internet just is, right? It's like electricity or water or whatever. It's you know, a given for people. Like for younger people, you're right. It's always there and it's real life. Whereas we approached it as, like you said, when we were kids, it wasn't there. And then we very slowly eased into it, and it became a daily thing. I used to check my email once a month, then once a week, and then eventually I would check it every day. And now my wristwatch beeps if I get an email. It's that's how fast things have changed. But it is very interesting to think about whether we are just getting older, and it seems strange to us, or whether it really is having these sort of negative cultural impacts.
I mean, I think it's a little of both, because I mean, there's obviously, negative cultural impacts. I mean, there's obviously been a breakdown of communication between people. I mean, if you follow psychology, there's definitely a very wide range of research showing that rates of anxiety and depression are skyrocketing in the primarily in these younger generations because of their exposure to social media. And I mean, and honestly, I think that there's going to be a lot of research into dopamine burnout as well. People who post, get likes, they're constantly getting fed that dopamine, that when those chemicals run out, it can damage other parts of the brain, because your body can only make so much of it. And primarily with access to I mean, I'm not gonna blame it on the pornography, but also access to pornography whenever, folks' dopamine receptors are shot. And when you start seeing the long-term implications of that generation after generation, then you're going to see changes in brain chemistry because of that evolutionary need for it. So I mean, when you look at, the effects of technology, you look at like the longer time span in mind, the big picture, it's going to rapidly change not only how we perceive culture, but how we perceive reality.
Yeah, no, 100%. It is doing real things, but then every once in a while you'll see like an old meme or something pop up, where it's like people felt this way about newspapers when they came out. Like, oh my God, you can just have information right away and it comes to your house, and it's just going to destroy the social gathering hub and the thing. Or when the telephone was invented, and all of a sudden, oh my God, what's this going to do to the mail?
Yeah.
Well, it, things change, and it does, I think, probably have an evolutionary impact on our physiology that we just haven't really seen yet. There haven't been enough generations since electricity to have made that much of a difference. But it's happening. It'll be very interesting. I wish we could see 1,000 years into the future and see what happens, and maybe in 100 years they will be able to see 1,000 years into the future. So jealous.
Yeah, right. I mean, I would give I would just like to be able to, see 30 years in the future. Be able to write down a few records, place a few bets when I get back, that sort of thing. But I don't know, I guess looking towards the future, just to kind of finish up, do you have any projects that you're looking forward to looking into? I mean, what can we kind of expect from the future for you?
Well, I don't really know right now. I'm kind of enjoying my first downtime in a decade without a big project on the horizon. I just moved and I'm kind of getting settled in and weighing my options, kind of seeing what's next. Because if I were to take on another documentary, that's a 2 to 4 year commitment. So I'm gonna feel it out and see what's next. But definitely still gonna make stuff. I like making stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, next project you have, definitely let me know because I'd love to talk to you about it. And I definitely enjoy that downtime because yeah, a 2 to 4 year commitment to something is it's something you're gonna have to have a personal connection and a sense of passion for because yeah, that's a long time span. But in the meantime, I do hope we get to see you make a really, really bad horror movie at some point.
I would love to.
All right, folks. So the documentary is The Last Blockbuster, and that's currently on Netflix. I'm sure it's already popped up in your feed. It popped up in mine a few months ago. And as far as the other documentaries, the history of, oh, sorry, Pick It Up Ska in the '90s, and then Here's to Life: The Story of Refreshments. Where are those ones located at? Are they on any specific streaming services?
Yeah, they're both up on Amazon and Vimeo, the more indie DIY spot for movies.
Yeah, yeah, I like yeah, both those streaming services are really good. I'm a big fan of Tubi as well because Tubi's just got everything on there. So if folks did want to reach out to you, do you have a certain social media handle you prefer to promote?
Man, I wish I did. I manage the ones for all my movies and my own personal ones, but I'm very Googleable, and I probably spend more time on the movie ones, like the Last Blockbuster movie on Instagram and Facebook, and the Ska movie, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all that. That's where I'm most active, I guess.
Awesome. Well, Taylor, it was good talking to you. Glad I have you on the phone or had you on the show. And see, that's my mind reverting back to the '90s there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I will say, folks, that if the last blockbuster has taught me anything, it is that we need to live in the moment and we need to be more cognizant of those places that matter to us, those places that we feel we have a connection to, because there's a chance that they may not be there in the future. There's a chance that society might leave them behind and leave a part of ourselves behind as well. Good night, folks.